It's 11:47 p.m., and you're staring at your banking app, doing that thing where you refresh it 5 times, hoping the number magically changes. You know the feeling, that tight knot in your stomach when you open a bill and you don't fully understand a single word on it. Maybe you nodded along in a meeting when someone said APR and compound interest, pretending you totally knew what that meant. Here's the secret nobody tells you. Most adults are just as lost as you are. They're just better at hiding it. Nobody handed you a manual for money. School taught you the quadratic formula, but not how a credit card actually works. So today, we're going to fix that, one simple idea at a time, starting from absolute zero. No jargon, no lectures, no pretending you should already know this stuff. By the end of this video, budgeting, interest, inflation, and credit will finally make sense. Like, actually make sense. Think of this as the conversation you wish someone had with you years ago in plain human language. We're going to follow one simple story, a normal person trying to get their money life together, and use it to explain everything. Every big, scary money word is just a small, simple idea wearing a costume, and we're about to take that costume off. Let's start with the first pillar of financial literacy, budgeting. Picture your income as water flowing into a bucket, and every expense is a hole draining it back out. Budgeting is not about restriction, it's simply about knowing where that water is going before it disappears. Most people don't struggle with money because they're bad with numbers. They struggle because they've never actually looked at the full picture. So step 1 always is figuring out your real monthly income, the amount that actually lands in your account. Step 2 is listing every expense, and yes, that includes the little $5 coffee that feels invisible. Expenses generally fall into 2 categories: needs, the things keeping your life running, and wants, the things making life enjoyable. Rent, groceries, electricity, transportation, these are needs, the non-negotiables. Streaming subscriptions, eating out, that new pair of sneakers, these are wants. And wants aren't bad, they just need a boundary. One popular and simple system is the 50-30-20 rule. 50% of your income goes toward needs, 30% toward wants, and 20% toward savings or debt repayment. It's not a strict law, it's a starting compass to see if your spending is leaning too far in one direction. Let's watch this play out with a simple example. Imagine your monthly income is $3,000 after taxes. Under the 50-30-20 rule, that's $1,500 for needs, $900 for wants, and $600 for savings. If your rent, bills, and groceries already eat up $2,200, that's a signal your needs percentage is too high, and something has to give. This is exactly why budgeting isn't about guilt, it's about awareness. You can't fix what you can't see. A simple way to track spending is separating it into 3 lists: fixed expenses, variable expenses, and irregular expenses. Fixed expenses stay the same every month, like rent or a phone plan. Variable expenses change month to month, like groceries or gas. Irregular expenses show up occasionally, like a birthday gift or a car repair, the ones that always seem to surprise us. This is where an emergency fund becomes your best friend. An emergency fund is simply money set aside so that when life throws a surprise expense at you, it doesn't turn into a crisis. Most financial guides suggest saving 3 to 6 months of essential expenses, but even $500 set aside is already a massive safety net. The trick to building one isn't willpower, it's automation. Moving money the moment you get paid before you can spend it. This is often called paying yourself first, treating savings like a non-negotiable bill instead of an afterthought. Budgeting fails when it feels like punishment, so the best budget is the one flexible enough that you'll actually stick to it. Give yourself permission for small joys in the budget, because a plan with zero fun rarely survives past week 2. Once your income and expenses are finally visible on paper, something interesting happens. Money stops feeling scary. Now that we understand where money goes, let's talk about something that can either work for you or against you: interest. Interest is essentially the price of money, the cost of borrowing it, or the reward for lending it. When you put money in a savings account, you're technically lending it to the bank, and they pay you interest in return. When you borrow money through a credit card, a loan, you're the one paying interest as a fee for using someone else's money. There are 2 main types of interest you need to understand: simple interest and compound interest. Simple interest is calculated only on the original amount, called the principal. If you borrow $1,000 at 5% simple interest per year, you'll owe exactly $50 in interest every single year, no more. Compound interest is different and far more powerful because it's calculated on the principal plus any interest already added. In other words, compound interest earns interest on interest, which is why it's often called a snowball effect. Let's visualize this with a small snowball rolling down a hill, picking up more snow, more size, the further it rolls. Say you invest $1,000 at 5% annual compound interest. After year 1, you have $1,050. But in year 2, that 5% is calculated on $1,050, not the original $1,000, giving you $1,102.50. It looks small at first, but over 10, 20, 30 years, this snowball becomes enormous. This is exactly why financial experts obsess over starting to save or invest early. Time is the secret ingredient that makes compounding powerful. Someone who starts investing at age 25 can end up with significantly more money than someone who starts at 35, even if they invest less overall. That's the magical side of compound interest, when it works for you through savings or investments. But compound interest has a dark twin, and it lives inside your credit card statement. Credit card interest, often called APR or annual percentage rate, is usually compounded daily or monthly. If you only pay the minimum balance, the interest keeps compounding on what you still owe, and your debt can snowball just as fast, but against you. This is why a $500 credit card balance can quietly balloon into $700 or more if it's left unpaid for a while. Understanding this single idea, that debt can compound just like savings, is one of the most powerful lessons in personal finance. So, here's a simple rule of thumb. Compounding is your best friend in savings and your worst enemy in unpaid debt. The good news is, once you see the pattern, you can use it strategically, save early, and pay off high-interest debt fast. A useful mental shortcut here is the rule of 72. Divide 72 by your interest rate, and you'll roughly know how many years it takes your money to double. At 6% annual return, your money roughly doubles every 12 years. At a brutal 24% credit card interest rate, your debt could double in just about 3 years if left untouched. That single formula turns an abstract concept into something you can calculate on your fingers in seconds. Interest, at its core, isn't good or bad. It's simply a tool, and like any tool, its impact depends on which side of it you're standing on. Now, let's shift to a concept that quietly shrinks your money even while it's just sitting in your bank account: inflation. Have you ever heard someone say, "Back in my day, a movie ticket cost $1," and wondered how that's even possible? That's inflation in action. The gradual rise in prices over time, which means your money buys a little less each year. Inflation happens for many reasons: increased production costs, higher demand, or simply more money circulating in the economy. Governments typically aim for a small, steady inflation rate, usually around 2% per year, believing mild inflation keeps the economy healthy. But even 2% adds up. That innocent-looking number quietly erodes your purchasing power year after year. Let's make this real with something familiar: a cup of coffee. If a coffee costs $4 today and inflation averages 3% a year, that same coffee could cost around $5.38 in 10 years. The coffee didn't change. Your dollar simply became weaker, buying less than it used to. This is the exact reason why simply saving cash under your mattress or letting it sit untouched in a low-interest account isn't actually safe in the long run. If your money earns 1% interest, but inflation is running at 3%, you're technically losing 2% of your purchasing power every single year. This gap between what your money earns and what inflation eats away is sometimes called your real return. This single idea is why so many financial experts encourage investing, not just saving, for long-term goals. Investing, done wisely, aims to grow your money at a rate that outpaces inflation, protecting your future purchasing power. Rent is one of the clearest, most painful examples of inflation many people experience directly. An apartment that rented for $900 a few years ago might now rent for $1,300 or more in the same neighborhood. Wages don't always rise at the same speed as inflation, which is exactly why so many people feel like they're working harder just to stay in place. Understanding inflation isn't about panic, it's about strategy, knowing that letting money sit idle has a hidden, invisible cost. It also explains why your parents' stories about prices back then aren't exaggerations. The numbers were genuinely different. Inflation is a bit like a slow leak in a tire. You don't notice it in a day, but ignore it for years and you're stranded. The takeaway isn't fear, it's awareness. Your money needs to grow, or it quietly shrinks in value while just sitting still. So budgeting tells you where your money goes, interest shows how it grows or how debt grows, and inflation tells you why doing nothing has a cost, too. Now, let's tackle the concept that probably causes the most confusion and, honestly, the most anxiety: credit. Let's start with the most basic question, the one people are often too embarrassed to ask out loud. What actually is credit? Credit is simply trust. A lender's belief that you'll pay back money you borrow based on your track record. Every time you borrow and repay responsibly, you build a reputation, and that reputation gets converted into a number: your credit score. In the United States, credit scores typically range from 300 to 850, and generally, higher means more trustworthy to lenders. That single three-digit number can affect whether you get approved for an apartment, a car loan, or even certain jobs. So, what actually shapes this number? The biggest factor, making up about 35%, is your payment history. Simply, do you pay your bills on time? The second biggest factor, around 30%, is your credit utilization. How much of your available credit you're actually using. A simple rule here: try to keep your credit card usage under 30% of your total limit, ideally even lower. If your credit limit is $1,000 and your balance is $900, that high usage can hurt your score, even if you pay it off in full every month. The remaining factors include the length of your credit history, the mix of credit types you have, and how often you apply for new credit. This is why financial advisors often suggest keeping your oldest credit card open, even if you don't use it much. History matters. A common myth is that carrying a balance and paying interest actually helps your credit score. It doesn't. That's simply a myth. Your score only cares that you pay on time and keep usage low. It does not reward you for paying interest. Now, let's clear up a confusion that trips up almost everyone: the difference between a credit card and a debit card. A debit card spends money you already have, pulled directly from your bank account. A credit card spends money you're borrowing from the bank, which you're expected to pay back, usually by a due date each month. Used responsibly, a credit card can actually be a powerful tool. Building your credit history while offering protections a debit card doesn't. Used irresponsibly, that same card can trap you in high-interest debt that snowballs, exactly like we saw earlier with compound interest. The golden rule many financial educators repeat is simple. Only spend on a credit card what you could already afford to pay in cash. That one habit alone prevents the majority of credit card debt problems before they even start. A credit report is different from a credit score. Think of the report as the full story and the score as the one-number summary of that story. In the US, you're actually entitled to a free credit report annually from each of the 3 major bureaus, so checking it costs you nothing. Reviewing your credit report regularly also helps catch errors or even fraud, because mistakes on these reports happen more often than people think. Building good credit isn't about being wealthy, it's about being consistent. Small, boring, repeated good habits. And that consistency is something absolutely anyone, at any income level, starting today, can begin building. Let's go back to that moment we started with, you, at 11:47 p.m., staring anxiously at your banking app. Now imagine opening that same app, and instead of anxiety, you actually understand what every number and every term means. Budgeting shows you where your money goes, interest shows how money grows or debt grows, inflation shows why your money needs to work, and credit shows how trust becomes opportunity. None of this required a finance degree, just clear explanations and the willingness to finally ask the questions you were embarrassed to ask. You are not behind. You're not stupid for not knowing this sooner. Almost nobody was ever properly taught this. The only real difference between someone who feels confident with money and someone who doesn't is simply access to clear, honest information. And now you have that information. If this finally made money make sense, even a little, that's already a massive win. So take one small action today, even just opening your banking app and actually reading it. Subscribe if you want more of these no-jargon breakdowns of real-life money topics, because this is only the beginning. See you in the next video, where we'll keep making money make sense, one simple idea at a time.